The most famous fact about the Voynich Manuscript is that you have heard 1,000 times that it's the world's most mysterious book, that nobody can read it despite centuries of trying, that it contains strange illustrations of impossible plants and naked women in green liquid. But any cryptographer who has spent years analyzing it will tell you that this comfortable mystery narrative is an illusion. It hides more than it reveals. It merges tourist fascination with a disturbing truth that becomes impossible to ignore. We look at the photographs and see just beautiful medieval artwork, but if you look closer, if you dig deep into the statistical analysis instead of random gibberish, we will find patterns that suggest something far more unsettling than an unsolved code. Today, we will look through the symbols and find what modern linguistics tried to explain away with comfortable theories. We will see evidence that the text follows natural language rules too perfectly to be a hoax. We will find out how the illustrations depict biological knowledge that shouldn't exist in the 15th century. We will discover the radiocarbon dating that proves the manuscript is genuinely medieval. And we will understand why some researchers are literally convinced this book was written by someone or something that wasn't entirely human. This manuscript is not just an unsolved puzzle. It is a gigantic challenge to our understanding of medieval knowledge, the implications of which we begin to grasp only now. In the early 1900s, when cryptographers began to seriously analyze the Voynich Manuscript's text, they faced a problem that put linguists in a stupor. They had to explain why a document that appeared to be gibberish exhibited statistical properties identical to real languages. They brought frequency analysis, pattern recognition tools, and code-breaking expertise, thinking that the cipher would crack like any other medieval code. This manuscript was more than 500 years old, but when they ran the text through statistical analysis, the results made no sense for a simple cipher or random hoax. They mapped every symbol, calculated frequency distributions, analyzed word patterns. The numbers were impossible. The text wasn't behaving like encrypted language or meaningless fabrication. It was behaving like natural language, real communication following linguistic laws. The researchers were shocked. They expected either a breakable code or obvious fakery, but the evidence behaved differently. The more precisely they analyzed it, the more language-like it appeared. It seemed that the Voynich text wasn't encrypted communication. It was genuine language, just one that nobody on Earth has ever seen before. As if medieval Europe hadn't produced this, as if the writer was using linguistic structures that don't match any known language family. Of course, when these findings reached the public, conspiracy theorists immediately seized the narrative. People were convinced that the manuscript was written by aliens or time travelers or interdimensional beings trying to communicate. They said that no human could create a fake language this linguistically consistent, or that the book contained advanced knowledge deliberately hidden in unknowable code. The origin of this mystery was mixed with theories involving everyone from Roger Bacon to extraterrestrials, or those who came from the future. But if the language structure was convincing, then the next discovery made researchers realize they were dealing with something far stranger. And what they found in the illustrations made them believe the book contains knowledge that shouldn't exist in 1400s Europe. Any botanist who examines the Voynich manuscript will tell you about the plants. The biological section contains over 100 detailed botanical illustrations. These aren't decorative drawings, they're technical diagrams showing roots, stems, leaves, flowers, and seed structures. The problem? Most of them don't match any known species. When botanists first analyzed these illustrations in detail, they expected to identify medieval European flora, garden plants, medicinal herbs, common crops. Instead, they found biological impossibilities, plants with root structures that violate botanical classification, flowers with petal arrangements that don't occur in nature, hybrid organisms combining features from multiple species. Researchers decided to systematically catalog every plant illustration, comparing them against databases of known species, both extinct and living. And the botanical conclusion was disturbing. A few plants might be stylized versions of sunflowers, water lilies, or other recognizable species, but the majority, they match nothing. And it's not about artistic liberty or poor drawing skill, but about consistent biological detail that doesn't correspond to Earth's plant kingdom. Any taxonomist will tell you that the illustrations show too much specific anatomical knowledge to be fantasy. The way roots branch, the phyllotaxis of leaves, the structure of reproductive organs, these are drawn by someone who understands plant morphology. Yet the species don't exist. Building a hoax with botanically plausible but non-existent plants requires expertise that a medieval forger wouldn't possess and wouldn't bother developing for a fraud. So the plants are detailed, too detailed to be random fantasy, yet too alien to be Earth flora.
But if impossible botany was disturbing, then in the astronomical section, they discovered something that made researchers question the manuscript's terrestrial origins entirely. There they found diagrams that seem impossible even to describe coherently. When we say medieval astronomy, the image appears of crude celestial charts, maybe zodiac symbols, basic planetary observations. This is the picture that makes sense. But if you examine the Voynich astronomical folios, this expectation disintegrates. There are no normal star charts, no recognizable constellations, and no medieval cosmology. There are wheels within wheels containing what might be stars or cells or something entirely different. Circular diagrams with naked female figures emerging from or bathing in tubes connecting cosmic structures. Pages that seem to show celestial mechanics, but using symbolism that matches no known astronomical tradition, not European, not Islamic, not Chinese. Researchers who first examined these sections often didn't understand what they were seeing. They saw complex mechanical diagrams suggesting advanced understanding of something, possibly astronomy, possibly biology, possibly both merged in ways that wouldn't occur to medieval minds. They thought the illustrator was simply confused, creating random mystical imagery. But if you analyze the consistency of symbols across pages, the careful geometric relationships, the repeated motifs, you can see that this isn't confusion. This is systematic representation of something. Nature doesn't create the kind of precise geometric relationships shown in these diagrams by accident. This astronomical biological section in the Voynich manuscript is real impossibility. It looks like it should represent cosmology or cellular biology or perhaps concepts we don't have categories for. Yet in fact, these diagrams were created in an era when astronomy meant observing planets and biology meant basic herbalism.
And the most incredible thing is what they might mean. Some researchers have proposed the diagrams represent embryology, the development of life at microscopic scales. Others suggest they're cosmological, mapping relationships between celestial bodies using non-Euclidean geometry. A few have argued they're pharmaceutical, showing how medicinal compounds interact with the human body at levels not understood until modern chemistry. Each interpretation is speculative, each is unsatisfying, each fails to explain all the elements. The solution to this mystery shocked modern scientists with its implications. The medieval manuscript's creators were in a situation where they needed to convey complex information, but their conceptual framework was limited, and they invented a visual language that merged biology, astronomy, and perhaps other sciences into unified symbolic representations. But there was one element that made this explanation unsatisfying: sophistication. The diagrams aren't crude attempts at science. They're intricate,
carefully constructed, geometrically precise. It turned out to be knowledge that, if genuine, suggests understanding of natural systems that wouldn't be achieved for centuries. This scientific sophistication survived analysis by modern researchers who admit they don't fully understand what they're looking at. For decades, astronomers assumed the diagrams were astronomical. Biologists assumed they were biological. But what if they're neither? What if they're representing relationships between systems using frameworks we haven't conceived?
Until recently, researchers considered the astronomical section to be decorative mysticism. It seemed that the only logical explanation was medieval obscurantism, deliberate obfuscation through symbolic complexity. Scholars viewing high-resolution scans see intricate details, nested circular structures, precise geometric relationships, consistent use of symbolic elements across multiple folios. This careful organization was an axiom until modern imaging technology revealed details invisible to earlier researchers. And when they enhanced the images digitally, examining every line and every symbol, they noticed something that shattered comfortable assumptions. The astronomical section isn't random mysticism, it's structured data representation. The circular diagrams encode information using position, size, color, and connection in ways that suggest systematic knowledge organization, not art, not decoration, information architecture designed to convey specific meanings through visual relationships. This completely turned our understanding of medieval information encoding upside down. The diagrams weren't created by mystics drawing pretty pictures. They were created by someone attempting to encode complex multidimensional data in two-dimensional visual form. When the medieval mind looked at the cosmos, it didn't separate astronomy from biology from meteorology. Everything was interconnected. The manuscript might be trying to show those connections using visual logic we've lost because we've specialized our sciences.
This linguistic precision worked as something that contradicts simple forgery theories, yet nature created nothing linguistic without human minds. With invisible grammar rules, these symbols were organizing themselves into sentence-like structures, paragraph-like divisions, and chapter-like sections. They literally demonstrated hierarchical organization found in complex written communication. Moreover, the text shows dialectical variation. Different sections use slightly different symbol frequencies and word structures, as if different scribes wrote them, or different topics demanded different vocabularies. This variation makes the hoax theory even more complicated. Creating a fake language is hard. Creating a fake language with consistent grammar, natural word frequency, and dialectical variation across sections, that's harder than just learning to write in a real language. Which raises the question, if someone had the linguistic sophistication to fabricate this, why not just write in Latin or Italian with a simple cipher? Why create something so elaborate? This carefully maintained consistency worked as evidence of genuine linguistic competence, preserving communication across centuries while the language itself remains unknown to any human population. Without translation, researchers can continue analyzing statistical properties, documenting grammatical patterns, mapping symbol relationships, and allowing the content to remain encrypted, perhaps forever. The contradictions are published in specialist papers that cryptographers read, but the public ignores.
This discovery completely overturned nothing, because solving the Voynich Manuscript would require admitting either that medieval hoaxers had modern computational linguistic knowledge, or that an unknown language with no living speakers was used to write a detailed scientific text. Now, researchers analyze, document precisely, publish findings in academic journals, and carefully avoid stating the obvious conclusion. Any attempt to claim the text is genuinely unknown language is considered speculative, career-limiting, unscientific. But if linguistic sophistication was academically dangerous, then the radiocarbon dating results showed that dismissing the manuscript as modern forgery was impossible. And what the tests revealed made researchers realize the book's age is verified, its contents remain inexplicable, and the mystery only deepens. Until the early 2000s, skeptics maintained that the Voynich Manuscript could be an elaborate 19th or 20th century hoax, perhaps created by Wilfrid Voynich himself in 1912 to make money, or by an earlier forger. This comfortable skepticism was maintained despite historical records tracing the manuscript's ownership back to 1600s Prague. Scholars noting similarities to the book see medieval materials, but definitive proof remained elusive. Then, in 2009, the University of Arizona conducted radiocarbon dating on the vellum, the animal skin pages, and when the results came back, the skeptics fell silent. The vellum dates to 1404 to 1438 CE, early 15th century, definitively medieval.
This wasn't 19th century paper. This was genuine medieval vellum, made from calfskin, prepared using 15th century techniques. The ink also tested as consistent with medieval iron-gall ink. The materials are authentic. The book is genuinely 600 years old. Which makes everything worse, because now we know, in the early 1400s, someone created a 240-page manuscript in an unknown language, illustrating impossible plants and incomprehensible diagrams, using linguistic structures that follow natural language laws, all for purposes we cannot determine. Why? Medieval forgeries existed to make money or deceive, but the Voynich manuscript sat in private collections for centuries, rarely seen, never published, financially worthless until modern fascination made it famous. If it's a hoax that failed to benefit its creator. If it's genuine communication, it's communication that has failed to reach its audience for 600 years. Either way, it represents enormous effort for no apparent gain. The dating results proved the manuscript is genuinely medieval, but they didn't explain why it exists, and that's when researchers started proposing theories that venture into uncomfortable territory. Theories that suggest the manuscript might be genuine, not a code, not a cipher, not a hoax, but actual documentation of something. Something that existed in the 15th century, something that required its own language to describe, something we still don't understand.
Because here's what we know for certain. The vellum is medieval. The ink is medieval. The text follows natural language statistical laws. The plants are drawn with botanical expertise but don't match known species. The astronomical diagrams show sophisticated knowledge organization. The linguistic consistency is too complex for simple forgery. And nobody, despite centuries of effort by professional cryptographers, linguists, and computer scientists, has cracked the code, or proven it's gibberish, or even agreed on what kind of document it is. But if dating confirmed medieval origin, then the theories about what the manuscript actually contains venture into territory that makes academic researchers extremely uncomfortable. And what some specialists privately believe, but won't state publicly, is that the book might be describing something real, something that existed, something that we've lost or never knew existed. The most rational explanations have all failed. It's not a simple cipher, those are breakable. It's not a constructed language, those show artificial patterns. It's not a pharmacological text in code, the content doesn't match. It's not astronomical tables in unknown notation, the patterns are wrong. It's not heretical religious text, no theology appears. So what remains? One hypothesis that keeps resurfacing in private conversations among researchers: the manuscript is written in a natural language, a real language, one that was spoken by a small population, in an isolated location for a limited time and then vanished.
Perhaps a monastery, perhaps a remote valley, perhaps a single family maintaining private knowledge across generations. They developed their own writing system. They documented their observations of nature, but their nature included species we don't recognize. Possibly extinct, possibly regional variants never cataloged. They studied the cosmos using frameworks influenced by non-European traditions, perhaps Islamic science, perhaps Asian cosmology, perhaps indigenous knowledge systems. And then they disappeared. Disease, war, migration, death without heirs. Their language died with them. Their knowledge was preserved in this one manuscript, which wandered through Europe, purchased by collectors who couldn't read it, stored in libraries that didn't understand it, until it became famous as the book nobody can read. This explanation accounts for the linguistic sophistication, its real language. It explains the unknown plants, their real species from a specific ecosystem we haven't identified. It explains the strange astronomy, different cultural framework. It explains why nobody can crack it. There's no cipher to crack, just an unknown language with no Rosetta Stone. But this explanation is professionally dangerous because admitting we can't solve this is admitting failure, and academia doesn't reward admissions of failure. So instead, researchers say it's a fascinating mystery and avoid committing to any interpretation. The manuscript remains studied, analyzed, published about,
And fundamentally unexplained, because the truth might be simpler and more troubling than any conspiracy. We don't know what this book is. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know what it says. And we might never know. In the 15th century, someone created this. They spent years writing 240 pages in careful script. They drew intricate illustrations. They organized information systematically. All of this effort went into a book that communicates nothing to us. Because we've lost the key. The language is gone. The culture that created it vanished. And we're left holding a beautiful, maddening, perfect mystery. A book that proves medieval Europe contained pockets of knowledge we know nothing about, traditions we never documented, languages we never recorded, all swept away by history's indifference to preservation. The Voynich Manuscript isn't a message from aliens. It's something potentially more disturbing. Proof that human knowledge can be so thoroughly lost that later humans can't even recognize it as knowledge. We started our journey with the comfortable idea that the Voynich Manuscript is the world's most mysterious book, and ended up with a truth that is more unsettling than any supernatural explanation.
The book did not fulfill its purpose as communication. The language died, the knowledge vanished, the meaning was lost. But it fulfilled a purpose its creator never intended. It preserved a question that forces us to admit our limitations. We cannot read it. We cannot solve it. We cannot even agree on what it is. And perhaps holding the manuscript in climate-controlled archives and looking at pages that have defeated every attempt at understanding, we should think neither about aliens, nor time travelers, nor mystical codes. We have to think that even our most confident claims about medieval knowledge will always be challenged by artifacts we cannot explain. And this is probably the most important lesson that the Voynich Manuscript teaches us, that human knowledge is fragile, that languages die taking their wisdom with them, that entire cultures can vanish so thoroughly that we cannot recognize their achievements, that the greatest mystery isn't what the book says, it's what we lost the ability to hear.